Hello and welcome along to another episode of Manx Radio's newscast, an opportunity to hear the guests we speak to in full without some of the sometimes brutal cuts we have to make before it's broadcast, and what you'll hear on Breakfast, Man in Line, Update or the hourly bulletins. Today we look to education, in particular the island's public school, King William's College, lovingly nicknamed King Bill's, a school which began as all boys but became co-educational in the 80s. It has approximately 500 pupils, some of whom grew up on the island, but also attracts international ones too. The new headmaster took the reins in September, so is approaching the end of his first term in the top job. Growing up, he attended the University of Cambridge before heading to Eton to teach what he calls the two R's, Russian and rugby. Damian Henderson, thanks for joining us and welcome. And firstly, just take us back to the southeast of England. You grew up in a small village in Kent and attended grammar school.
I was at an all-boys grammar school in Tunbridge in Kent, which let in girls in the last year in sixth form. So we had 15 girls in a school of 800 boys, Christian. You can imagine how that one played out. But we managed to keep our eyes on the prize and concentrate and all get our exam results and go off to the universities that we wanted to go off to anyway. But yes, no, schools were very different back then. I started secondary school just at the end of the 80s and for most of the 90s, and schools were very different places then. And I wish I'd had then a lot of the input that the young people I've worked with over the years, and certainly am working with now, have had. There was a very strict approach to discipline, as you can imagine, and vertical positions of responsibility, whereby the prefects were feared genuinely. And there was very little mucking around in that sense. So, yeah, very happy school, but very strict and very different from how they are now.
So what did your parents do when you were growing up?
My dad was actually a journalist. He was a newspaper journalist in London. And he was from the northeast, and my mum was Scottish. So they moved down to Tunbridge Wells in the 60s and relocated, abandoned their roots in the north of England and came down to the southeast. So we grew up in a lovely little village in Kent where they still live. And
education is quite different from being a journalist like your dad.
Sure. Dad had not even really done A-levels, bless him. So he was very keen. Both my parents were very education focused, certainly for me and my brother. And we were had the firm hand from home to push us to do our homework. And so, yes, we did well in our exams and went off to university quite successfully.
It's interesting that because you attended a state school of sorts and then went on to secure a place at one of the most prestigious universities in the world, Cambridge. Then after that, you say that you fell into teaching by accident, no less than Eton, which is arguably the most famous school in the world. That's not a typical path to take, is it?
It was pure chance. It was an accident. I was helping my supervisor at Cambridge move house, and I was wearing my rugby kit to do so. And she said, I've just had a call from Eton. They want someone to do rugby and Russian for a year. And I thought of you first, and I won't ask anyone else in the group until you've considered it. So I had to take that as a massive compliment and go down and have the interview. And yeah, I'd never considered teaching up to that point. So I only thought I'd do it for a year, but I loved that. And then 1 year became 2 years, 2 years became 5 years, and so on. And so I'm now in 23 years of teaching, and I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
And what was your view of public schools before you went to Eton? Did that change at all throughout the time that you were there?
I didn't really have a view. I'd been to a grammar school which was next to another famous public school, Tunbridge School, in Kent, where I grew up. So I had a particular view of that school. I didn't really have a general view, but we had a great time. The thing that people tend to forget when they're talking about schools is they focus on the building and the institution and what it looks like, and they forget that really we're talking about a group of people. And I think many of the conversations nowadays could usefully be reframed when talking about schools in just concentrating on the fact that they are there for kids, for children. And so certainly the boys, because they are all boys at that particular school, made a great impression on me. And I wish that school all the best, as well as all of the other schools like it that keep on doing those traditional wonderful things that they have been doing for centuries without any interference at all.
Cleaning and selling double glazing, I hear, are two jobs you had before you headed into teaching. Were those weekend jobs?
That was my holiday job as soon as I left school. The morning after the last A-level and subsequent party, so therefore on no sleep, we all reported to the local branch of our double glazing emporium, and we spent the summer treading pavements and knocking on doors in and around the southeast. So if I put it politely, if I knocked on 100 doors, Christian, and 99 of those doors gave me either no answer or a very firm negative answer, and I won't say the exact words, but you get my drift. But one would say yes, and that's all we needed to earn our little bit of money to finance our whatever social lives we had at the time. So yes, that was a very happy summer. And then I've also been an early morning supermarket cleaner, which again helps you see the world from a different perspective.
And you were at Eton from 2001 for 8 years, then on to Taunton School, which is not too far actually away from where I spent the later years of my secondary education. How did Taunton compare with Eton? It must have taken some getting used to being called a teacher as opposed to a beak.
Sure. Well, I worked at other schools, but between those two, after Eton, I worked at Cranley School in Surrey, and then I worked at Stephen Peirce Foundation in Cambridge. So I'd had that experience as well. It's really hard to compare Eton with any other school. Taunton School is an absolutely brilliant place, but no one would be comparing it with Eton. Eton is incomparable in so many regards. But we had a great time at Eton, my wife and I. We met there and we moved our family once, twice, 3 times to Taunton, and now four times to the Isle of Man. Some
of the 12 founding attendees of the Headmasters and Headmistresses Conference.
Yes.
They do have unusual words for things, so like Eton has beaks, Sherborne for homework is hall. Does KWC have any traditions that you're particularly fond of?
Yes, the prefects are called praeposters, the Latin word. So that's a good bit of lingo. We call homework prep. Everything else is pretty much standard, but I did particularly like the function of the prees, and they're a very good group of people. They keep me on my toes, feeding back the student voice, as we call it, to make sure that I'm aware of what's happening in their lives.
From what I can tell, you are a big fan of traditions. You're in favour of school uniforms?
Absolutely, yes. We've just reformed our school uniform. We sent a letter to parents, current parents recently. The uniform, if you go past the school or know any of the students, is traditional. And after a lot of consultation, which happened before I even joined the school, parent groups and feedback from lots of different stakeholders, we're making the uniform cheaper, more flexible, and more modern, more wearable, and more suitable for the students' lives, because it hadn't changed for decades before then.
And I think you said that my former students would say I was either very scary or very funny,
yes,
but never knew which one they were going to get. In what way could you be perceived as scary?
I've got this, not now because we're having a lovely conversation behind a microphone, but I think I've got a good deadpan face walking into the classroom. I can give that look that can go either way, as in to be frightfully jolly or frightfully scary if they haven't done their homework or have committed some other small academic crime which needs a raised eyebrow. But certainly that reputation, I think, dates back from when I was a teacher, and you get promoted away from what you love doing, so I spend less and less time in the classroom. I still do teach this year. I would hope I'm not scary for the very small number of students I'm currently teaching at King Bill's. They're all very good. They all do their homework, no problems. But yeah, that was the sort of mantle I carried. You try and carve out a niche for yourself. You try and carve out an image for yourself in any job. Teaching's no exception. And that was where we landed all those years ago.
And like you say, you get promoted away from doing what you love. You're now in a position where you're in charge of the school. And leadership is one of those qualities that can be approached in a multitude of different ways. Often people aspire to be someone that inspires them. So who inspires you?
Gosh, in school leadership, I've had the great fortune to have worked with and for all of my heads and principals have been great. Enjoyed some very good, strong female leadership at the Stephen Peirce Foundation in Cambridge. When I was there, that was a school on a real journey, carving out, again, new uniform, looking at changing the sex of the students in terms of admitting boys. They were on that journey, which has now come to pass. Dealing with the iPad which was then a sort of new addition to the teacher's toolkit or the student's satchel. Everyone's got their own idea in their head of what they think the ideal headmaster, headmistress, principal should be, and it's largely based on their own experience when they were at school. So I will be the best head principal for King Bill's and the Buchan School that I can be.
And you mentioned iPad there, which is kind of almost a newfound technology of sorts. You've given a TED talk before, a rather poetic one, about 4 years ago, where, interestingly enough, you were talking about education in the 22nd century and how technology could revolutionize the way the academic system works. Even though that was 4 years ago, I don't think artificial intelligence was on as many people's radars as it is now. I mean, the speed at which that is advancing, that's already shaking up the education system, isn't it?
Absolutely. So I gave that TED talk, you're right, pre-pandemic. AI in education wasn't really a thing. It was simply, the title of the talk is Education for the 22nd Century, simply because with the way that longevity is happening now, the children that are at my school now or at the island schools could and should live to see the 22nd century. With the way work patterns are going, they could even be working still into the 22nd century. So far from talking about 21st century skills, the premise of the talk was, shouldn't we be talking about 22nd century skills? Since then, obviously, we've had the pandemic and everything has changed. Schools pivoted to emergency remote teaching on various platforms. Students and parents all had to rush out and buy devices. And now we have this amazing, beautiful opportunity with AI for education to do so many things. But I wish, as with all things, the pace of change wasn't quite as fast, because it's really hard to stay ahead of the curve and work out which sensible policies you could institute as a school. And that, I think, is always the way with new technologies. They evolve faster than policymakers and sort of planners and educationalists can really get their heads around them. So different approaches are happening at different times. We're an IB World School, and the International Baccalaureate Programme, I should say, which is a charity that's existed for many years now, but which runs 4 different programmes around the world. And we do at KWC the diploma programme in the 6th form as one of our courses. And they have a policy whereby you are allowed to use educational AI, but you must reference it. You have to just said that you've used it and use an appropriate citation. And that's fine for them. And that's a very different position from other qualification givers, other education boards around the world. So who knows where we'll land. It's a very exciting year to be in education, certainly.
It is interesting because obviously there are some students, not necessarily saying at KWC or anywhere, but there are some students who will use platforms like ChatGPT to generate homework for them, and then they won't reference that. I think you were previously quoted as saying that technology has a big part to play in getting the very best from pupils. Do you still believe that's the case when we know that some might use it for less favourable reasons?
Sure. It's up to the individual teacher to, above all, know the students. And I would say that KWC, we really know our students, and therefore not just we'll know when they're using things that they shouldn't be using, but that we have a really good relationship with them. Teaching is all about relationships, as I've said before, and they can persuade them to use AI or whatever assistive technologies in the right way. There's so much there, actually, also to help teachers in terms of productivity, lesson planning, marking. Exams blatantly are going to be set and done by students and marked in 10 years' time. On online platforms, digital platforms, they're already coming out. They're already in pilot stages, being trialed. The world will be different in 10 years' time, just as it is different now from 10 years ago. And it's up to schools just to stay that little bit ahead of students to make sure that they're safe online with whatever they're doing and responsible, and that they're actually learning rather than making the machine do all the work.
I know we've talked briefly about this before, how most people's perception of how a school should be run by the headmaster is based on their own experience. And a lot of headmasters and headmistresses will go into a school with their own ideas, their own vision of how they want the school to go. So how will technology form part of that for KWC?
I think what I want for the school is for it to retain its traditional charm, its traditional character. Certainly that's what I get back from the parents, and they love so many of those very I won't say old-fashioned, but again traditional, normal, routine characteristics that you know and that I know from our backgrounds that have been going here for nearly 200 years, but also giving students the chance to have digital skills that will equip them for university and then obviously into the jobs market.
And university is recently that there's been almost a shift away from university where some people say that they don't see the value in it, and there's more people going into apprenticeships, more people that are going straight into work. Where do you stand on that?
I've actually brought with me the list of destinations of our university leavers from our school leavers from KWC at the end of last year, and exactly as you said, Christian, the variety of destinations, and also the fact that not everyone, for good reasons, is going to university in the traditional sense is striking. So we have, as an international school, students going to universities all over the world, whether they are in the UK, Oxford, Cambridge, what used to be called red brick universities nowadays. Maybe Russell Group is the right appellation, I don't know, but also to a vast variety of universities around the world, to all sorts of exciting courses. That's one way I think technology has really helped, is in opening students' eyes to the fact that for the course that they want to do, it's not necessarily in the UK. I won't cast aspersions on the UK university system at the moment, but it is very expensive, and the student experience isn't always great and wasn't great during lockdown, and sometimes not great now, strikes and delays in getting their degrees and so on. And that's a really exciting prospect, is opening up every corner of the globe to students as they take their diploma or whatever they're leaving school with and moving off. A increasing number going straight into work or via apprenticeship routes, and gap years obviously remain popular for students who either don't know what they want to do, or they know what they want to do, but they know they don't want to do it yet. And they've got the luxury to take that year to work and travel and enjoy themselves.
What would you say your top priorities are for King William's College? Now you've been there for almost a term.
Sure.
You've probably seen how everything works as is. What are your top priorities in changing anything?
Definitely, and I've said this before, I definitely want to get more students in the sixth form. We took a wee dip during COVID and haven't quite come out of it yet. So there are some very good schools on the island, and that's great. But we would argue that vast majority of our students would be very comfortable in our own sixth form after their year 11. That's upper five in our parlance, and also driving boarding numbers. The school has got this wonderful stock of boarding accommodation, and we need more students to get in there and return it to what it used to be primarily as a boarding school with day children, and now it's sort of flipped round. So those are the two things that I'd like to see.
What do you think someone learns from being a boarder?
Massive amounts. So I'd argue, obviously I would say that because my background is in boarding. I didn't go to a boarding school, but I've taught at boarding schools. I've taught at non-boarding schools as well, but I do love boarding, as you can tell. The social, there's this thing with humans, isn't it? Social learning. We do learn a huge amount from ourselves. I'm not saying that if you're not a boarder, you don't learn anything from your parents and your siblings and your out-of-school activities, but we call them boarding families, and they're a very warm, supportive environment. Teachers and the boarding house staff are all very highly trained. We've got a matron, we've got catering on site, wonderful food at KWC, and a 24-hour medical cover. So it really is, everything is thought of, everything is taken care of, and it's a wonderful cocoon for a young person to develop in before they go off to explore the wider world.
And there were previously plans at KWC for an Olympic length swimming pool. That was blocked though. But do you think the facilities need work at all?
I heard about this actually when I applied for the job. So yes, were we to build anything, we'd be starting from scratch. Again, there's nothing in the pipeline in the same way as exciting government plans for a new school in the south of the island seem to have moved forward. Yesterday, I think I saw on manxradio.com website, all new heads, the golden rule in this thing, all new heads, principals coming in will, of course, say they'd love to build a sports hall and a climbing wall and an aquatic centre and a cookery school and all of these things. The main facility, where we are rich is in the teachers. And that is brilliant. The staff are absolutely fantastic. They have wonderful relationships with the students. And you can see that just as soon as you walk into the school. Genuinely understand and care about young people. Very, very warm relationships in the lessons that I've observed, and assemblies and chapel situations. And so that is great. Yes, we would love to improve the facilities across the board. What school wouldn't?
Without getting political, we know that the government has plans to grow the population.
Yes.
And I know that you've just spoken about increasing and driving the number of pupils. Public schools are famous generally for having smaller class sizes. Will KWC cope if there are an influx of students?
At the moment, class sizes on average are small. It depends which year group you're in. It depends which subjects you do. If you do sixth form classes and you do the IBDP, you can be having classes with single figures. But if you're in fifth form, perhaps you have a much larger class than that. So no, there is no published reliable data that says that small classes generate better academic outcomes. Schools with smaller class sizes tend to generate better academic outcomes, but whether that's correlation, causation, no one's ever really proved. So no, at the moment we have the luxury of small classes, and that is a big selling point for students and parents. I would argue it's not necessarily about the number of students in the class, it's about the quality of the teaching. And I think, as I said earlier, that goes a lot back to relationships and teachers who take the time to know their students and go the extra mile for them. We see ourselves as a very important part to help Isle of Man government with its strategy of raising the population. I think it's by about 15,000 people over a certain period of time. And I would like to politely suggest that education should be a little bit higher up on the posters and on the promotional materials to attract people to the island, because realistically, I would imagine most of the people coming would have children. And I don't necessarily mean private education, paid for education. I want to improve the quality of education across the island, and that's including at the government-run schools, and I see them as partners rather than competitors.
Interesting, because a lot of people who've been to state school, or people that are in a state school at the moment, especially in the UK, I think maybe it's exacerbated there. It's often them and us, especially members of like the Eton group, for example. But from what you've just said there, it sounds like you want it to be more of a all of us together.
Sure. They are only children. They are only kids. Whether they're currently at an independent school or in the maintained sector, we all want the same thing as a species, is for the very best education for all of our children, whatever talents they have, whatever gifts they have, whatever personalities they have, wherever they're born in the British Isles or the world, because obviously we educate students internationally. A trick that I missed coming here, University College Isle of Man has international borders just like we do. So there are far more points in common between independent and state education than there are differences, largely because we are all educating children at the end of the day, and their needs are very similar from one school to the next.
And just as we come to the end, let's get away from school. So when you get home from work or when you're on annual leave, what makes you tick?
I would like to say that I'm a long-distance runner. Looking at me now, Christian, you can see that I'm carrying timber. So I will get back to doing what I enjoy, which is running and marathons and things. I haven't managed to explore the island in that way yet. But yeah, I have a very predictable middle-aged man hobbies of doing marathons and dog walking.
And cooking curry, I heard.
Cooking curry, but less so recently. I do a really nice pistachio chicken curry. And the only reason I don't cook it very often is because you have to shell and de-skin 100 pistachio nuts, which takes forever. So if you want to come round, you're very welcome to come round, but you will have to help me with the de-skinning of the pistachio nuts.
That sounds like a good idea.
Labour intensive.
Well, there we have it. The man who's been in the educational system since leaving Cambridge and has since relocated here with his wife and 3 children. Not an easy job to oversee a school, but he seems up for the challenge and stresses the importance of working together with others rather than the them and us approach that is often stigmatised in the UK. Naturally, he'll want to make changes, but for the first term in the headmaster's office, he seems confident he's got what it takes to do just that.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Little Manx Radio newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.